Hi everyone, it's Coco again. Thanks for waiting. So just in case this is the first time that you're joining us today, I'm Coco, one of the co-founders of Startup Lady Japan. And I just wanted to just to let you know, Startup Lady, we're bringing gender equality to the startup community. We're trying to foster a safe space and a community for women and non-binary individuals so that they can find, start, and grow their own businesses with inspiration, education, and support. The reason why we started doing these lives recently is because we wanted to bring value and support to the community. So I hope you enjoy these. And of course, always want to give a warm shout out to all of our supporters and anyone that is watching us today. So thank you. And don't forget to like and follow our Facebook page and join our free membership for additional free goodies. Definitely don't want to miss out. Please join us, and we're doing our best. So hopefully you can gain some value from what we're doing at this time. So without further ado, I'm really excited today because we have a special guest who is one of our Startup Lady advisors, but she's also a very close personal friend. So I am very happy about today's live. And just to give you a little bit of background, Jen started Cookhouse SF after being inspired by the volunteer efforts around 9/11 in the United States that brought New York City back together. From then, she changed careers from data research to leading a company focused on genuine hospitality and the healing nature of shared meals. So please help me give a warm welcome to our guest, Jen.
Hi, Coco.
Thanks for being with us. So I am
Thanks for having me.
super excited. We're going to be talking about how to balance your personal life and work as an introvert.
Nice. And it's really comforting to know you are one too, because
Yeah, you're right. Because I mean, the main reason why we decided to talk about today's topic was because obviously I reached out to you as a friend. I'm really stressed right now.
Mhm.
It's really difficult because like right now I don't know how to deal with everything that's going on and my usual life and work and like
Yeah, it's a lot.
it's like for you. I mean, this is the question I asked you, but now we can actually talk a little bit in more detail. But
Sure. Yeah.
how do you deal with like needing to spend time alone to recharge while having certain responsibilities and face time that you can't avoid?
Oh my gosh, there's so much that goes into this question. And the funny thing is when we first thought when we were first talking about this, which was about I want to say like 2 months ago, um, the world has changed already in 2 months. So it's really interesting. Of course, like everything that you're dealing with is it's just it's so much and so much is in flux and there's so much uncertainty anywhere in the world. And of course, we're in different geographies. So yeah, I'm trying to keep in touch and just make sure, everyone's good here and over there as well. Because I care about you. You're my friend and I want you to be okay. And of course, I want to see if there's anything I can do to help. But for my part, over here in California, it seems like in some ways, just talking about the overall environment, it doesn't seem like too much has changed. If you drive outside, you'll still hit traffic. You go outside for a hike, there's tons of people around. So it's funny because even though it's like, if you turn on the news, it'll say like, be scared. There's a lot of things to fear, which is, partially true. But one of, gosh, there's so many little things that I don't want to, anything that I say, if you want to go into more depth on it, I'd be curious to see what you're curious about. And that way we can go deeper into it. But then anything else is, I'll just gloss over. One of the things I realized after, quarantine started over here, it's more like a mandated quarantine, was that I started packing my schedule really tight with, meetings and making sure I was always doing something, like that drive to just keep being productive and everything. And it's funny because like, even though like when things were relatively normal, maybe you have like a little bit more mindfulness around how busy you are. and how much rest you need and how much time you need with friends and without friends and sleep and all that kind of stuff. But then when everything changes and your environment changes, it's almost like you start from square one. And it's like, okay, now I have to rejigger everything. So not packing my schedule too tightly. Luckily, I live in Northern California too, so it's easy enough to get outside and have some time in nature. That helps a lot. Limiting our time with the news. For example, here in the United States, we had quite a complicated process with regards to federal loans for small businesses that were affected by COVID-19. And because of that, and here's the kicker, it kept changing too. So it wasn't just like, here's a loan. It's a really complicated process for getting the loan, and then also like the conversion to a grant process and all that kind of stuff. But not just that, it kept changing. Like every few days, there would be new news about it. And because of that, even though I'm not used to keeping on top of the news, I had to keep on top of the news because it affected, my finances and my company, and the fact that my workers were laid off and then I was trying to bring them back on. And, the timing of it was just it just felt very touch and go. So I've never been on the news so much. And so I had to find a new way to manage my input, let's say. Because they say, like, for example, for your physical diet, they often say you are what you eat, but we are also what we mentally eat, like in terms of news. And I'm not sure what platforms most of your members are on, but like if you're on YouTube a lot, if you're on Instagram a lot, if you're on, I don't know, even Google a lot, a homepage or cards or anything like that, you'll just be fed stuff. And sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. And I didn't realize until I totally burnt out twice that I was just being overwhelmed by all this news, which was scary because I was like, they could do this, and then you'll owe like 5 times as much. It was nuts. So I had to sort of edit myself down. So it's changed. In answer to your question, before this, I had a certain way of managing my input, and that was partially just what came into my mind. So, of course, news, people, the amount of meetings, all that kind of stuff, my time in nature, my amount of sleep. And then now it's just like, okay, I got to limit how many times I'm on Zoom calls a day so I can get out and not just be stuck in front of my computer all day. I've got to have a little bit of FaceTime, even though it's like from 20 feet away with my neighbor, just like yelling hi. I do, and I remember we talked about this too. Some people define introversion differently. So just to let you know where I'm coming from, and I'd be really curious to hear where you're coming from too, in terms of your experience being an introvert. But mine is just that I seem to need a lot of time to myself, and I want to say rest, but it's not quite like sleeping. It's just like being in nature. I like hugging trees. I like walking. I like I don't know, playing video games. I haven't turned on my PlayStation in 4 months, but I will eventually. I like doing all these things by myself, and often that's a very I think it's only been since Susan Cain's book back in 2012, I want to say, or 2013, called Quiet, which is a really great resource if any introverts out there are looking for a good resource for introverts. But I think that's how she defined it, and it was very much like you just recharge by being yourself, and extroverts recharge by being with others. All in all, we could say it's a pretty good time for introverts because we're kind of stuck inside over here in the United States, at least. But it definitely had like this entire shelter in place order just created an entirely different way of being. But yeah, I'm curious to see what's your experience also being an introvert, and what is it like when you feel like you're more oriented toward your inner self, for example?
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely a true introvert. Anyone that knows me well will probably have seen me. I'm definitely on the darker side lately. um, I need a lot of alone time. If I could, I would probably go into a cave and just like not talk to anyone for months. But unfortunately, that's not an option. And
Right.
I could say that like, and maybe an example I could give is ever since maybe like around February, I've had so many meetings online and I've had a lot of things that I have to deal with currently.
Yeah.
And I can't keep up with all my responsibilities, which means I don't really get to talk to my friends or hang out with my friends outside of my
Mm,
work friends
mm,
because I don't have the energy or the time.
mhm,
And even then, I'm still struggling. I'm struggling to find time to sleep. I'm struggling to find time to be alone.
mhm.
And honestly, like just to put it bluntly, I would say it just makes me like a very angry, agitated monster. Pretty
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for my team who has actually been seeing me like this because usually I'm very calm and
Okay.
I don't speak a lot, but
Yeah.
I think lately they kind of see me very agitated and stressed out, and I'm finding it very difficult.
Mhm.
It's gotten to the point that it's making me physically sick because
Mm.
it's difficult to have this pressure to interact with people, even
Right.
like in Zoom meetings, putting on my video, talking.
Yeah.
It is a lot of pressure. And I'm
Yeah.
so introverted that it does affect me. And that's why usually I don't kind of go uh, show my face and interact with people as much outside of the team. So yeah, maybe that kind of
Yeah.
is a little bit about my like introversion and how difficult it can be for me
Yeah.
interacting with people now.
I'm so glad you shared that because it's very honest and everything you feel is okay. And there's so much going on. And of course, like I'm sure you're not the only one feeling this. Um, so it's very humanizing and normalizing to hear another person's experience of like what goes on inside when there's just so much happening. And you have to deal with a different way of being with people, even though you don't always, feel the best. And um, it's not always, it's not the best for your health. So yeah, it's so good to even say it out loud because recognizing that like I can share in your experience and now it saying it out loud too, even when I tell my friends this, like, I'm just so angry at everybody right now. I can't believe human beings. Um, just
Really feel the same.
yeah, better out than in, right?
It's not to them. It's just because like they don't understand like what it's like to be in the life of a very introverted person
Right.
where you just want to be alone. You just want to be left alone in your own space with your own thoughts and not be forced to verbalize anything and just
Mm-hmm.
just you know just be there.
Yeah, I hear you. I definitely hear you. And I mean, we live in a world that is so, how do you say it really the way our communication highways and roads are built, it like really values or gives more traffic to people who are louder or, well, generally elicit more reaction, whether it's out of love or fear. It's just like whatever is our like innate reaction. It's like funny people, for example, which is great. I like that, it amplifies funny people. But more extreme in views or maybe more frequently expressive. Whereas, you and I have different forms of expression, you through dance, me through fighting, maybe, but like jujitsu, not like actually like picking a fight. But there's a lot of things in there that like don't really not value, but like don't really amplify the voices of people who are introverted because it doesn't it doesn't really give them much of a voice when there's such a like an exponential amplification of those voices that are more in the usually extroverted side. And don't worry, like I am not devaluing extroverts. I hope I'm not, at least, at all. I think they're great. I have a lot of friends that are extroverts. I get along really well with extroverts. I think it balances me out really well. But and I mean they could probably get a lot out of this talk too, because none of us are completely introverted. Like I'm very introverted, but I'm like maybe 90%. I don't know. But part of the time I'm a very, very trained extrovert. So like sometimes I do feel a little extroverted and sometimes I'm actually bulldozing my way through and I can usually feel when that's happening. Um, That's exhausting, by the way. We shouldn't do it too much. But, but yeah, I mean, that's generally what we're doing at the beginning of this coronavirus thing, because all of a sudden we're thrown into this different world where we're on Zoom calls so much. And even maybe before, you know, when we're pressured to be there for other people, to show up, to show our faces, to express ourselves even when we're not ready to, or just not like, you know, like it just there's a lot of pressure to do so, especially, you know, as a business owner, entrepreneur, and it puts a lot on us. But I learned this maybe about I want to say like maybe 5 years ago. This is about 5 years into having my company. And for anyone that doesn't know, basically I run a company that hosts parties and events. So as an introvert, this is a really strange thing to do. It was almost like I was forcefully training myself to be an extrovert, which I did. Before I started my company, I was like, I have to learn all the pain points of having a small event for business and for work, or for personal social events. And so I forced myself to have a party every week. And it was hard, let me just say. It was really difficult. But at the same time, I kind of realized that we as introverts have kind of a unique ability to serve in ways that extroverts can't. Because, you know, like I really value the skills of extroverts. And just like we learn from our peers as well as mentors, because everybody's a little ahead in some ways, and we're a little ahead in some other ways. So we all kind of just learn from each other. I just found that there were a lot of things that weren't addressed by people that were trying to grow huge companies or trying to look for where the money was. And I get it. Like, I'm in a very small, very, very thin margin business, which is getting thinner by the day. Help us, San Francisco. But it was a very interesting niche where a lot of our partners, vendors, and clients were just like, wow, I don't think anybody's ever paid attention to this problem before. What made you think about it? And, you know, a lot of it had to do with just the personal connections that I've experienced, that I personally get a lot more out of than just being in a big party of 20 people, which is great. I like being in a big party of 20 people, but only if I'm having one-on-one conversations with people. Like, I remember when you and I met, I think it was in Sugamo, and it, you know, like, I just kind of like glommed on you. I was like, yeah, let's have a deep conversation in the middle of this huge party. I'm just gonna like steal you for the next 20 minutes. Sorry, no one can talk to you. And same thing with the other friend that you introduced me to. I'm not sure if I should use names on, you know, live stream, but like, but I loved her, and I was just like, well, let me just like steal you. And I realized this after about, I want to say like 23 years of life, but I can only really relate with 2 or 3 people at once, including myself. So like one other person or 2 other people. Once it gets to 4, I'm already like I don't know, my brain just doesn't work. Just kind of implodes.
I think so we have a question from the live, and what can we do to help introverts when they are struggling? I think that would be very helpful for a lot of people, including myself.
Okay, struggling with what? Let's see. Well, let's start with you. In what ways do you feel like you're struggling? Is it like you're not being forward enough with yourself in your business in front of your clients? Is it more like struggling to get enough alone time? Struggling with the pressure of sales, maybe, or promotion, or any of those things that, you know, introverts have a hard time doing usually?
Yeah. Well, this question isn't very specific, so let's kind of narrow it down. I think one of the main pressures, at least that I've been feeling lately, is it's having to interact with people, but also trying to keep up with my responsibilities, as well as taking care of the team or whatever I need to do. Do you have any tips for a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's that's a lot of running a business, right? It's like, that's just the whole time management thing. Yeah. And so I guess it's very universal, but hopefully, again, like I can go into such a deep dive on any of these things, but um, I would say one of the things that helped me the most, and I've been able to do a lot more of it since COVID-19 started. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh about the situation. It's just that it's changed so many things that to me, it's just like, wow, it's so crazy what's going on. But one of the things that I've been able to deep dive into a lot more is journaling. And I love journaling from before. But it's been such I want to say like a gold mine. And you have a rich inner life, I have a rich inner life. We have a lot of stuff that we resonate with and that we just like we learn about ourselves just by being with ourselves, resting and listening and being with our intuition. And I never had time to do that and to set aside time when I just started the day going to work right away. So like if you have a 9 to 5, maybe you get up at like 6 or 7 and then you get ready and you go to work and then you're at work. But then after work, my mind is still at work. And then I just can't seem to calm down, especially like if I have to make social time with friends. And it just feels like it feels like I can never really make that time. So I feel so much better. And again, this won't work for everybody, but if you're up to it, give it a shot. I've been really enjoying getting up at like 5 in the morning, maybe even earlier, with the sun rising, and just like unashamedly taking like 2 or 3 hours just to journal. And I want to say, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think I've ever done that, but yeah, definitely.
Not every day. Yeah,
Yeah.
not religious about it, but journaling, but also keeping track of your emotional life, because that's really interesting. Sometimes like it helps you deal with problems at work in a much more, I'm gonna say expeditious, but that sounds very productivity oriented, in a much more effective way, I want to say, because sometimes when you're introverted, your mind is quiet compared to other people. Like you're sort of like thinking things, and then other people come in like, hey, I need this. Hey, we have a meeting. I need a debrief. So it just feels like other people like kind of come into your space, whether you like it or not. And I feel like when you are more in touch with your sort of emotional language, what's going on with yourself, you know how to manage that a lot better, because it just knows it, you know where your baseline is basically. So that's some of what I journal about. For example, it just brings a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah. And then so we have a question from Farida on Facebook. And she's asking, what do you usually do when you feel socially drained at work? So, for example, like if you're at work and as an introvert, like let's say you have to go to an office, like some people do, regardless of now or before, but I mean, and you feel drained, what do you do? Like you can't leave, you have to be around the people, you have to stay there. Do you have
Yeah.
any, like, what are some things that you would do in that situation?
Sure. By the way, I want to ask you first, so I get a lay of the land. Are open offices like the norm in Japan,
Um,
or is it more like closed offices?
I'd have to say I personally don't have a lot of Japanese office work experience. I think it really depends.
Oh, okay.
So there are open offices, and I'm sure there are other types too, but I definitely wouldn't be in a place to be able to say.
Yeah.
I'd say the two offices that I do know personally, they are open offices.
Okay. Okay. Hmm. Um, I don't have a very long, when I worked in a corporation, it didn't feel like a corporation, but I did have an office cubicle. And then later on, I had an office, and the two felt very different. So I guess what I wanted to say was that it depends a lot on your environment. So, if you said a lot of people have open offices, or maybe it's a mix, but if it's an open office, then you know, you do have to pay attention to your environment quite a bit. So it's not just visually, like how are you separated from other people? Do you really feel like you have space? Do you feel like other people can see what you're doing, can see you? Can you hear their music? You know, and vice versa. Are there a lot of people walking around? Or is there a lot of stimulation? Because that can really drain you as an introvert. So in my office, which is really just a big event venue, which is really the most gorgeous office I could ask for, and like kind of looking out onto San Francisco and all these landmarks, and it's beautiful. But because of that, you know, it's an event space, and we don't close off offices or anything like that. So um, we would put on headphones, and well, here's one trick: we put on headphones. They're big, so you can tell I'm wearing headphones.
On right now, I think, right?
What's that?
You have them on right now, I think. Yeah.
I do. These are like 20 years old, and I love them. But um, that would just be a it's not like, shut up, I'm trying to work. It's just like, it just sends the signal. And I mean, we did communicate this with all my coworkers, just like when I put my headphones, it doesn't mean like, I don't want you to talk to me at all. It's more just like, I want to really focus on something for the next, I don't know, how long or ever long I have my headphones on. And I really just want to get into it. So I'm not trying to shut you out. I'm just trying to, you know, sort of like focus me in.
No, I totally get you. I have,
Yeah.
I'm the same way. So I actually find I'm much more productive when I'm working alone at home than if I go into the office because I get very distracted by any kind of noise or rustle or something's happening. And I'm like my cat. I'm like,
Yeah.
what's that? What's that? Oh, there's
Yeah.
something there. Like, so I definitely do. I understand like what you mean with like the various stimuli. It's very distracting.
Definitely. And this is just a little cue, like just like, hey, this I'm intentionally focusing. If I don't have it, I did notice like a big difference. And it'd be like, hey Jen, what about this? You know, and vice versa. Like I was more distracting than my colleagues, by the way. So I'm much more guilty of this, and I'm really sorry. But like when somebody else didn't have their headphones or earbuds in, I'd be like, oh, and I just thought of this, or let's take a lunch break, or whatever. You know, it'd just be like whatever pops in my head. Another cue would, I mean, I do remember once I was in a cubicle and there was somebody worked next to me. I won't use names again, but she was very disruptive in a way that she didn't quite understand. Like she didn't see it as disruptive to me. But not only was it disruptive, as in like every other second she'd be on the phone, or she'd be calling out to her boss, or she'd be um, I don't know, but she'd also be like negatively disruptive. She'd actually like complain or just let out a big sigh or make some really snarky comment. And I mean, in America, snark is everywhere. So it just felt like very intrusive because I'm like, not only do I not want to hear your phone ring every 5 minutes, but I also don't need to hear like, again. And just like the audible eye roll was just so present in my life. Eventually I went to her and I just said like, listen, I really do need to get some work done and I find it very disruptive. Maybe, you know, maybe you don't realize you're doing it, but I do want you to know that it does affect my work. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that we might be able to work this out. Like, could you maybe put on a headset so that the phone rings and you can hear it and I can't? When you have to talk, maybe you can use an empty office over there and I'll do the same. You know, I'll also put on a headset and maybe that'll make it a little less disruptive for the noise coming in. So sometimes it's a compromise, but you know, to answer the question, I think when I was socially drained at work, it did have a lot to do with how, you know, what you were reacting to, just noise and rustles and ring. It's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I definitely find myself, I find myself distracting other people too because I'm like, oh wait, I should ask for this person's opinion, or you know, instead of trying
Right.
to actually deal with it alone as I usually would, just because that
Hmm.
person's there. That does happen to me. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Oh, can I offer another piece of advice?
yes, always.
Maybe somewhat more relevant to right now. But I have a certain amount of time for work, and my colleagues work only in a certain band of time as well. I start my work really early, and the time in which I intersect, sorry, in our the time that we overlap is actually quite small. It's only about 2 hours. So basically, if you or I have this tendency to bother other people, like when we think of something, and I noticed that when I change it just a bit to our overlap is just this amount of time, even though we're not in person with each other, we can't just tap each other on the shoulder and be like, hey, still, you still got slack and everything else. So it's so nice to just have a small window and just be really intentional about what you're asking somebody, so that, let's say one person's task is bookkeeping and there's like 20 different questions that come up because there's all these little things. If you distracted yourself 20 times over the course of like 2 hours or something like that, it feels like you would never get any focused work done. But if you grouped all those things together and it's kind of like unintentionally training them to do so, and just put it all together, not only can I answer them a lot faster because a lot of them are together, but they also answer their own questions a lot better. And I'm not distracted for 2 hours or however long they're it's usually just for like 5 minutes.
That's true. I have a question. So sometimes that happens that I'm already exhausted. This is like my normal state right now, but
Mhm.
I know that I'm very irritable
Mhm.
lately, and sometimes I really struggle when I'm speaking with people, and they're going on and on and on about like something, and sometimes what happens is like I don't mean to, and it's really not personal to them. It's also just my state of being is not that great right now. What do you do in those situations, like when they're just like constantly talking at you and then they're talking about the same thing but they're just
Mhm.
repeating themselves like 10 different ways, like
Yeah,
any tip?
I would just cut it off. Is that is that acceptable in Japan? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, I mean,
Sort of. I mean, I wouldn't, maybe irritable, maybe there's a different word we can use because I would be irritated too.
well, you are an
Justifiably. Who's talking at you?
introvert, I guess. All right.
I mean, I experience the same thing. And sometimes the last time this happened, I just kind of let it ride and I was just like, let me just see this as research. Let's just see how long this can go before they realize they keep repeating themselves.
Yeah. Or
Um,
it kind of like reminds me of like our actually, when we had a short call yesterday,
mhm.
and I remember we both were like, we jumped into the call, and I was like, first time I was like, Jen, I don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to be rude, but let me like jump into the main topic so we can make this call as short as possible. That's something that I do. I don't know if that is that
That's great.
about that. Okay.
Oh no, I think that's perfect. I mean, honestly, I think it's very honest. I think honesty is kind. And if you have only a short amount of time, I think that's really wise to communicate that. Any call, like when I have calls that are for a specific purpose, I usually limit it. And if there's no limit, the default limit is 1 hour. Because after that, I'm like, I gotta take a break. I need a snack. I need a walk. I need 15 minutes to feel like a human again. And then again, like there are some people um, that charge me up that I don't need to put that limit on. But that requires a lot of trust. That requires that you know the other person and maybe you've been together for years, etc. I have a friend in New York that I can talk on the phone with for 4 hours, and honestly, at the end of that conversation, I feel more recharged.
Yeah,
The same is true for you and Amy. I just
people like that in my life too.
yeah. Yeah, there are some good friends that are there, but like everyone else, just like I think it's great. I don't think it's like abrupt. I didn't feel like you were like, I don't know, walling me off or anything. I just thought, no, that's great that you told me. I always like it when friends tell me their boundaries up front. I mean, or later, whenever they think of it, or whenever it comes up, that's fine too. I mean,
Yeah.
like I think it's great just because I have trouble starting and stopping things sometimes. And, you know, if somebody has to go, I would rather them let me know than me like encroaching on their time accidentally. Um, so maybe it's a cultural thing, but I don't think that's at all uncomfortable or offensive.
Okay, oh, that's great. And we have a question from Aki from our
Okay.
team, and her question is, what are the things we need to keep in mind if we are working with an introverted coworker or business partner? I know you have a office manager that you work very closely with. Is this person a introvert or an extrovert? I'm curious.
Oh, I have somebody who used to be a general manager. Unfortunately, because of coronavirus, I have laid everyone off. So it's it's kind of I'll speak in past tense. She's still a very good friend of mine. She's a general manager, a very close friend as well, and she's very introverted, more so than me. I don't think she'll mind me saying. Um,
Okay.
and what's funny is that when I hired her, I kind of got a sense that she was an introvert, and I was kind of looking for an extrovert because I was like, I need somebody to balance me out. But I don't think that always works out because extroversion, introversion is only like one dimension of personality. It's like it's like nutrition. Like we might be able to like isolate turmeric or sorry curcumin from turmeric, and then we forget there's like 300 other compounds that interact with it, and curcumin isn't the end all be all. But like there's just so many different aspects of personality. It's funny, like she and I worked together for almost 8 years. Um, I tried not to become friends with my employees, but oops, and I'm glad I did. But she's great. She's very introverted, and you were asking your first question had to do with like being the face of the company, and I never wanted to be a face of the company. But at the same time, like I was practiced at being that, partially from my last job. So I think the only reason, like, we saw each other as sort of like, okay, we're both introverts. We both don't want to be around people, and yet we're working in events. What are we doing? And my past role, I used to be a speaker. I was a market research analyst, and I spoke at different conferences. And I was also a pianist who had trouble performing by myself. Not trouble, but I hated doing it. Um, I don't like being in the spotlight. I like to share the spotlight with other people. So eventually I figured out accidentally that I really love playing piano duets. So either on like four hands, one piano or two pianos. I love it. I love it so much. And it's partially because like you work so hard like all semester just to train with like two or three other people to perform a beautiful piece of music, and then you perform, but it's very clear that you did it with somebody else and you get to share the spotlight with them. So it's like it's partially me not wanting to be on spotlight and not wanting to self-promote, but it's also like, look at my partner, look at what she or he has done. It's so amazing. Like we have helped each other come this far. um and so I'm sorry, I totally went away from the question. What were we talking about?
We're trying
Oh.
to give some tips for maybe working as introverts working with an extrovert. So I
Right.
can definitely say from like startup lady side, I'm the only introvert, and I'm a super
Ah, yeah.
in our within the co-founders, and I definitely feel that it's really helpful for me, and I think it really complements everything that I can or cannot do. Um,
Mhm.
but I guess I'm just lucky with the relationships that I have with my co-founders, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think what are some tips that we could give?
Well, I mean, I feel like um, if if there's an introvert, so Aki was asking like if you're working with an introvert, whether or not you're an extrovert or introvert, just understand that they may not they what's that?
She's asking, as an extrovert,
Oh,
what
as an extrovert.
tips we could provide for them to work with
Ah.
people like us who are very introverted.
From a practiced extrovert side, but not an actual extrovert who sees the how an introvert really is, I think it's helpful to share what has worked. So sometimes an introvert just needs some tools like language or something like that. Like what helped my general manager a lot is when I just gave her some phrases to use just to start out with. So it just helped. It wasn't like, a lot of introversion isn't just understand it's not a lack of confidence. It's not because they're embarrassed or lonely or lazy or bored or boring or not creative or expressive or anything. Sometimes like some people like really put that on introverts and I'm like, that's not it. Like we're talking about two different things. And they're not disengaged. It's just that they engage in a very different way. So if you can understand that, sometimes like you might understand that they may not talk about like their project that they're working on, but then like 2 weeks later, without saying anything, they'll just hand in like a 40 pager written, of course. And then the entire time other extroverts might be like, expressing it verbally in front of a large group or something like that.
Yeah. And I guess for me, what works like as an introvert and working with like extroverted people is it helps me a lot when they just allow me to be myself,
Mm-hmm.
which means that a lot of times, like when I go to meetings or if we're forward like customer facing or
Mm-hmm.
client facing or anything, they allow me the opportunity to stay quiet and only speak when needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm usually, if I ever go to a meeting, if I get dragged to a meeting by chance, then
Mm-hmm.
like my co-founders know that they shouldn't really expect me to speak unless I have something really pressing to say that hasn't
Right.
been mentioned.
Right.
Um, that helps me. And I think the other thing is giving me the opportunity to actually speak, which means they have to, maybe enjoy a few moments of silence before they can expect to hear me say something
That's
has been
great.
very helpful for me.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if they continue talking,
Mm-hmm.
and even if they take every single moment of break as an opportunity for them to speak, then they'll
Right.
never hear me speak. I will just
True.
constantly stay quiet and just listen.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really, really helpful tip. And it made me think of somebody once told me, you know, um, before you answer, if somebody asks you a question, let's say you're not in a big meeting that you got dragged to, but somebody asks you personally a question, it's totally okay to like just take a few moments, take a few breaths, understand where you're at, like hear yourself as opposed to the other person and like what they might be expecting of you or anything. And then like gathering your thoughts before giving an answer. And sometimes, just because today's fast-paced communication world is very like, fast-paced. So it just feels a little bit like awkward, but awkward is totally fine. It's great, in fact, because I don't know, it just recognizes that we're all human and we're not machines. We don't just spit out code if you give me an input. So,
And speaking about awkward, there's something that I've always struggled with, and
mm-hmm.
a lot of people have, told me that it's normal, but I'm very uncomfortable with being in the spotlight as well as like self promotion. I know it sounds ironic just because a lot of you know that I love dancing and that means interacting with people. And the other one is, well, we're here today. And I know that this is being live streamed, but I'm very awkward and I really don't like the thought of self promotion.
Yeah.
That's probably why like I haven't like shared this live until now. I only did it today because like someone told me off that I need to do it and they're right. But do you have like how do you feel about self promotion as an introvert?
Ugh. Does that answer it?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And that's
plus,
really weird, right? I mean, for people like
weird.
yourself, I mean, you are actually a sole founder.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you kind of have that pressure. And you told me yourself that, you used to be like a speaker and stuff. Like, I can't even imagine.
Well, let me just say, like, it's so awesome, not just that you're an introvert and we're talking, but the fact that we're talking. Like, I used to give speeches and presentations, and you have slides, and you're at a podium and answering questions, all that kind of stuff. I could do that fine. I didn't enjoy it that much, but what I really enjoyed was talking in a panel. So you just have a conversation with like 4 or 5 other people. And I remember once, I feel like this is the first time I did a panel in front of like 500 people. And for some reason, I was just kind of like, nah, this seems like a lot of people. I'm a little nervous, I gotta admit. But then, and I didn't know any of the other people. I knew of them, but I didn't know them. We got on the panel. I looked at a crowd, fine, but all my attention was focused on those 4 other people, which was great. So like my attention is focused on you. I'm not talking to all these strangers. Even though you're all lovely for being here, thank you so much. But at the same time, like I'm just having a conversation with my friend Coco, and I'm hoping that you get something out of it, and I'm confident you will, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. But like after that, which was so funny, I just ignored the rest of the 500 people. And afterward, those 4 people, none of them were from San Francisco. This was in San Francisco at the Marriott Hotel. And then afterward, they're like, we want to continue this conversation. Do you know anywhere around here we can get like lunch or something? And I was like, yeah. So we just had another 2-hour conversation after that panel because we just liked having a conversation together. So, I don't know if that helps. It didn't feel like self-promotion. And that's the same thing it was like when I was performing piano with other people or accompanying somebody who was on vocals or violin or whatever. It just felt, it was great sharing a spotlight. And to tell you the truth, I've always wanted to share the spotlight for Cookhouse. I've just never found either the right partner or the right situation financially, where I don't put the other person in a bad situation because like it's financially dangerous to like put somebody in there like, oh, it could fail if you get 50% partnership. It's a little tricky, but I do feel like it's great if you're an introvert to share with somebody because it's a big burden, starting a company or just, starting any venture by yourself. And it is so much more fun when you get to share that journey with other people and be able to vent your frustrations out on them. And I mean, I'm Startup Ladies Advisor, so you guys can always vent to me. But you also have each other, and that gives me a lot of comfort, And at the same time, like there's just, I recommend anybody who's an entrepreneur who is struggling against the tide of this pressure to grow a big company just because bigger seems better or gets more attention, or gets more venture backing. I don't know. Whatever pressure you might have just by reading news about like all the exciting things that are going on for Tesla. You don't need to be Tesla. There's a great book called Company of One by an author named Paul Jarvis. It's a great book, to tell you the truth. It's really short. You can read an audiobook and it's read. I love audiobooks that are read by an author. You can really like feel a lot of emotion coming out of you. It's like really, it's like you're really in his brain. But it really puts the emphasis on how great it is sometimes to have a smaller company and how that fits a lot of personality types better and how you can succeed and still make huge impacts in the world and still make the world better just by honoring your needs as an introvert and or not having a lot of overhead, which is great, financially speaking.
I'm curious, like, did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
No. Did you?
No, I kind of just fell into it. Like with my super introversion, I've always been very good at supporting other people
Yeah.
and putting other people in the spotlight. And I've never thought of being an entrepreneur or even being a leader. I like I like supporting and I just want to make the world a better place, but in my own
Yeah.
has been, yeah, so.
That's good to hear. It seems like, and you're making a big difference. I talked to many of your members that come to the events and they're like, that was really valuable. This is so cool. I get to meet so many people. I didn't know resources like this existed, et cetera. I met so many new friends, et cetera. And it's really interesting. I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I just love to invent things. And so I just like, if there's not something already out there, then I guess I have to be the entrepreneur. But at the same time, like when I'm hosting these parties, there's a lot of people that I work with very personally. And there are clients, some of them are getting married. We don't have that many weddings there, but like a lot of them are business events. A lot of them are anniversaries, birthdays, et cetera, bridal showers. and photo shoots, etc. And a lot of times we work all of our, like, I want to say like 90% of our work is done before the event. It's all like the planning, the careful, like making sure everything is done well so that when they come in, they know exactly what to expect and there's no surprises and we have everything prepared for them. Because a lot of them are not like professional event planners, and that's the niche we live in. But because of that, you know, by the time they have their event, often they'll drag me out of the office and be like, "This is Jen. She's the owner of a cookhouse," and I'm like, "No,
No, don't do that. I'm not here.
I'm not here." Like, look at my general manager. Isn't she amazing? And I mean, granted, she did a lot of the work, so I mean, she does deserve a lot of credit. And I don't like to just hog the spotlight, so I'm just like, but you know, a lot of times they do want to celebrate you. So going back to your question about, you know, like self-promotion, like, it feels very wrong, especially given I'm not that familiar with Japanese culture, especially if you're from Japan. I grew up in I'm a first generation Chinese American living in America, but I grew up in Pennsylvania in the sticks, so a little bit in the sticks. So I was raised to not self promote. In fact, I was raised to be very, very sort of like hidden away in the shadows. Like, don't be creative, don't express art or whatever. Like, that's not even a job. And also like just like do your job and be smart and make money, but don't like make a ruckus, don't raise your voice, don't show your emotion, etc., etc. But I feel like when we're thrown into the real world of 2020 and here, which is America, I know you're in a different place, it does require a lot of self-promotion. And a good friend of mine told me recently that, you know, you have something that you have created for people. And, you know, in case you forget, I'm here to remind you as well, Coco, like you have created something with three other co-founders that is so valuable to people. Like, just imagine and any member that finds out about it and you're like, oh my God, this is exactly the resource that I need. You have something that is wonderful for them and you just need to let them know about it. And often I'm surprised about these things, but it's also the most fulfilling. It's usually when a client comes to me at the end of a night, they're like, or the next day, or emails me a few days later, or a few weeks later, or a year later, or even years later, and they're just like, I was just thinking about the amazing experience I had at Cookhouse and how valuable it was. And I was like, there is no other place that could have had that kind of interaction. We've had like families meet or people like, and people from different, like completely different socioeconomic backgrounds come together and like talk about their differences and like become lifelong friends. Um, and that to me is the most fulfilling part of my job. And then sometimes when I'm reminded of that, I'm like, oh, I did bring value to this world. Maybe I should let other people know about it. So then I just have to like make those things very intentional to remind myself, because otherwise it is very easy to default to either our introversion based norms or our cultural norms of being quiet and like reserved and I'm sorry to bother you. Would you like to buy my service?
Yeah, that's how I feel about it sometimes. But yeah, so every time like my team asks me to do something, like I think someone asked me to write like an introduction of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I can't do it. Like, ask me to do something else. Like, I'll just
So hard.
I'll figure out what the issue is, and I'll come up with a solution. We'll start like a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And you ask me like write about myself, like talk about. I'm like,
Talk
no.
about myself.
And when it comes to anything like that I have to do for myself for for Startup Lady, I'm just like, I'm so bad at this, guys. Like, I don't know what to do. Please
I
help.
know. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's one way an extroverted person can help you, or an extroverted, let's just make a main term, an extroverted practiced person. I don't know, extroversion practice person. That's me. I'm very extroverted practice, so I'm good at training introverts to act like extroverts when it's necessary. Um, Not more than you need, please. That's bulldozing, and that's very exhausting, like I mentioned earlier. But I mean, if you're an extrovert and you work with an introvert, often like you're already practiced at certain things, like certain forms of expression, or like verbalizing what you feel. And sometimes it helps just to understand where the other person is so that you can suggest a form of communication that meets the introvert's needs, or like a timeline that works with them, or like certain projects and everything. I mean, one benefit of being friends with your employees is that you get to know like all the personalities. So you can assign what fits, and therefore like they can grow in their own way, not in a like a square peg round hole kind of way, like you have to do this by a certain time and it has to be in this format. And you know, it's just a lot to think about sometimes. And sometimes if you just focus on what you and your skill and your personality will mesh with it, you get better results anyway.
That's true. And okay, so I have one final question for you that I've been wondering about since like I found out about it, but you wrote that it took you 5 tries to get Cookhouse right. How did you like restart after each attempt? That's each attempt. I mean,
um who said I got it right? I'm still trying. No, it's a fun journey. I think it was the author James Clear, who I love, by the way, who said, entrepreneurship is uh, a self-development tool in disguise. I think it was. Maybe those words aren't exact, but you get the point. And I think what's been interesting is that at every time, like it wasn't like here's a try, here's a try, here's a try. It was just constant iteration. Like after every single event, it was an iteration. Like I used to have a checklist that was 30 lines long, and now it's 219. And then it went down to 139 because I was like, that's a little much. But and then we started out by being sort of like a utility, and then people were like, I want this added, and then I tried that. I was like, well, back then, just to illustrate it a little bit more, it was pop-ups. And I was like, no, pop-ups do not mesh with me. I do not want to be like in there. I don't want to be event producing. I don't want to be the face. I don't want to be, I don't know. I just don't want to be in front of people so much because it's exhausting. I need to manage my energy. And then it became like, all right, then we're just kind of a utility and we're letting people do whatever they want, fine. And then it became like, okay, a lot of chefs need our help, like actually putting together these events. All right, let's put on value-added services. Oh, actually, it like works really well with clients too. Oh, in fact, it works really well with these kind of clients. So let's focus on that and see how else we can help them. All right, we did that with certain kind of clients. Now let's like really narrow our base a little bit. And it used to be like, as one example, that we just try to fit as many events in as possible, which kind of makes sense if your inventory like expires every day, space and time. But then I realized like that's not honoring my needs either. And your needs are important and you need to honor them, whether or not the world tells you to or not. So I realized, for example, like working doubles, which means 2 events in a day, doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for any of my staff either. So we stopped doing that. We stopped putting in too many events per week. So if there were 7 a week, or we just didn't take 2, so it would just be 5 max. And if they were really huge events, for example, I did not take more, like another one the day before or like late the night before, so I only got like 3 hours of sleep, etc. So it's just yeah, it's a lot of just management of my own energy. So I'd say like each try actually had to do with knowing myself a little bit better and what I actually wanted to do and honoring my own needs and preferences. So, and also like I didn't say it before, but I used to not honor my preferences either. Now I'm just like, no, I don't want to produce events. I don't want to collaborate. I don't want to do this. I'll be happy to refer you to another venue. And so will you. You'll be happier too, because, I'll be a grouch.
oh, that's very, it's good to know that, I've had those same issues and same thoughts once in a while. So Thank you
Good.
for sharing your time with us today.
Of course.
Really great. And Jen, it's always lovely speaking with you.
It's always lovely. Really. Like you're one of the few people that like really recharges my batteries.
Thanks, Jen. Well, you know you are too. That's why I reach out to you. So,
Yeah. And I love discussing all this. And if there's any questions on Slack, I always love type chatting because that drains my batteries slower too.
yeah. Well, then, anyways, well, thank you again for your time, Jen.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for everyone who joined us today. I know some of you will actually be watching this as a recording later on, but really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. In Japan time, it's Sunday around noon, and then in around San Francisco, that would be, or California, it would be 8:30, 9:30 p.m. So thank you for joining us on Saturday evening. And just in case, we are a volunteer-based organization and we are a nonprofit. So yeah, if you like these lives, please help us, please support us. And definitely we're going to continue trying to put these on to give value back to the community. And don't forget, there is a free Startup Lady membership. So please join. You'll get lots of additional freebies. So join us and stay tuned for the next live. We will be posting it as an event, again, event page. So you'll get the details and feel free to join us live and interact. Send us your questions. If you have any suggestions for topics that would be interesting to cover or that you want to know more about, please do. And yeah, thank you once again for joining Startup Lady. See you guys next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.